Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit more about rhetoric, rhetorical stuff, persuasive elements. This one is actually inspired a bit by some articles I've been reading about the president and politics in the United States lately. As we've been a little bit odd in the United States, if you keep up with our politics. We've had a lot of infighting and a lot of just bizarre general stuff. We had our Congress tried to shut down the government, and that was a big black eye for them. And then the president's now being sued by Congress for attempting to circumvent them. Although that's not to say that the president hasn't done anything incorrectly either. We've just had a lot of back and forth. It's all been really weird. But one of the themes that President Obama has been talking about lately is that he doesn't want us to get too cynical about our government, as he doesn't like the U.S. citizens to feel like the government is worthless. Because although there's a lot to complain about, as soon as everyone stops showing up to vote for, the things that they want, then it gets a lot harder to motivate people to go vote. And actually, the reason why he specifically is campaigning for this is because if you look at the way the voter demographics are turning out, the Republican voter base is actually a little bit more motivated for two reasons. For one, it's because when they vote someone in office and they say, like, we want to have these regulations cut, whatever, they get the regulations cut. So they get a little bit more of what they want out of office. The second reason is because we've got the anti-establishment party, and they happen to be running on the right. The anti-establishment party, of course, being the Tea Party, and they make me nervous, and it's probably good right now that we've got someone who is encroaching on the establishment, because the establishment is having a lot of issues with the way that they handle money. Mainly, it's all kind of like I've commented before, that a lot of U.S. politics seems very upper class oriented, as they focus a lot on who has money and who deserves. Like, if you're making money, you deserve to have all the opinions, and you get to make all the choices, and so forth. And that's kind of how our government seems to be working right now. And it's not a very good system, because we've gotten to where all of our businesses are now like big oligopolies, and they just kind of like run everything, and they gouge prices a bit, and they control wages a little too much. So on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff going on in our country right now, and it's kind of multifaceted, and it affects everyone just a little bit differently. But the recession has turned out really poorly. Long story short, is the recession has turned out really great for the top earners, for the people in Congress, and for the wealthiest business owners in the country. But it's turned out really poorly for most people, like the middle and lower class. The lower class is doing worse than it ever has in decades, and the middle class is... I've seen a bunch of different projections and estimates. Some are saying that the middle class is like earning 40% less once you adjust for inflation. Others are a bit more conservative. I mean, but the median income for the U.S. has definitely dropped. So, like I say, there's a lot of cynicism, and the president has been trying to campaign somewhat against the cynicism, but it's been an uphill battle. And so I've just been thinking a little bit about the whole concept, the way that we use negativity and positivity to create persuasive arguments. Cynicism has its place, it has its tools, but it works a little bit different than positivity. As Obama actually, he ran on a platform of positive change. As he got up there and he said, hope and change, and everyone wants things to be turned around. We want to get out of these trouble. We want to get out of Iraq. We want to fix healthcare. We're concerned about the economy, this and that. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to change everything. And that was a positive message. But then you've also got the Tea Party over here, and they're saying everything is ruined, and we are, maybe it's not fair. They're still kind of running on a positive message, I guess, but there's negative messages in there as well, negative persuasion. Negative persuasion, when I think about kind of what that is, one thing that I want to think about is Johnny Bravo. You see this a lot. A lot of people want to try and use negative examples of people they don't like to create a sort of us versus them situation. And they want to say, don't do this because people who do this are evil. But when they do it, that's not very persuasive, because the trouble is that when you use a negative form of persuasion to say, like, certain people are wrong, then what you do is you create this mentality that the people who are doing the wrong thing are other people. They're people outside of your group. They're not good people. They're not you. They're not the type of person that you are. And this is helpful if people kind of go in for your ideology and they identify themselves as this or that. You see this in most ideologies. I mean, anyone in any ideology will do this. They'll say anyone who follows, any Christian, Jew, everyone. They all kind of do that. It's like a good Christian does this, and a good person of the faith does this. Good. It's ideological. It's very common. But not, like I say, not especially persuasive if the people you're speaking to aren't already part of your group, or if you need them to join your group. That form of negative persuasion works better when people are already inside the group. Except, like I say, in situations like Johnny Bravo, which I was thinking about. My dad and I used to love Johnny Bravo. We used to crack over it. It was actually a good family show. My sister really liked it too. But Johnny Bravo I used to really love when I was a kid, because Johnny Bravo, he spent his whole life chasing women, and nothing he ever did worked. In fact, I believe they had at least one episode where Johnny explicitly quit focusing on himself so much and just dated a girl, and it worked out really well. And then he started, it was like a girl he wasn't very attracted to, and then she just loved him to death because he was like a really nice guy as soon as he stopped being a jerk. And so then though he realizes, like, oh my gosh, I kind of like this woman. I think I'm gonna try to impress her. And so then he puts on the Johnny moves and just ruins it for himself. So Johnny always kind of cracked me up because he went through his whole life sort of doing things that would never work. And the show, the Johnny Bravo show, it always showed that. It was always like Johnny never got rewarded. He had a strategy called being a rake, where you just try and attract as many women as possible. But his methods were so bad that he never ever attracted women. And it was mostly because he was so self-centered. He was always thinking about himself. He was always doing things to try and impress the girls. He wanted the women to see him as something really fantastic, and he never seemed to see the women as being something very fantastic. He would be met with goddesses. Like I believe that there was an episode where Odin proposed to give his daughter to Johnny Bravo, and Johnny still pulled the moves on her, and it was like she's a goddess, Johnny. She's above your level. You have to cool it a bit. So Johnny Bravo, a good example of sort of negative persuasion is that Johnny just went through his whole life and he never got rewarded for doing anything wrong. And occasionally, or when he did the wrong things, he never got rewarded. Occasionally, he would back off and he would stop doing the bad behaviors and he would start to get rewards, and then he would just fall right back into the bad behaviors and get punished again. Now, it's a tough sort of persuasion, though, when you think about it. I was thinking about this quite a lot, actually. I was kind of going... I go for a walk. I think when I walk, I was just thinking about how it works and how it doesn't. While it sort of creates a good example of how not to behave, the problem with punishment is that people tend not to think in terms of punishment. Like, you see Johnny Bravo and you say to yourself, like, well, Johnny Bravo's an idiot. He's a cartoon character. And as long as I don't act stupid like a cartoon character, I can still kind of exhibit bad behaviors as long as they provide a reward for me. And this is the problem, is that bad behaviors sometimes produce a reward. And when you try to show that you're getting less reward for acting poorly, it's hard to reinforce that when people still respond to that occasional reward. It's like winning a slot machine. You go and really gambling is a bad behavior. And if you showed someone, like you showed, oh yeah, this guy, he puts like $100 million into the slot machine and never wins anything. He always winds up with a net loss. You still know that there's that one person who hits the jackpot and they make it off. They get rich. They put like one coin in the thing and boom. They're set for life. So the reward is still present, and so people will still gamble, because even though you can show numerous people who've had their lives ruined by gambling, you know that there's still people who succeed by it. And so it's just kind of human instinct to want to do wrong things if there's some chance for reward. Even if the reward's really kind of disproportionate, So it doesn't work so well. But then you get into that's why. It just doesn't work so well. Punishment never works well. I've read it doesn't work so well for raising kids either. Because the problem is that the kids will learn not to exhibit bad behaviors if you punish them. But what they'll do then is they'll not exhibit those bad behaviors in front of you. Like, they'll go somewhere else where you can't find them, and then they'll exhibit those bad behaviors somewhere else. So the real key to persuasion is trying to figure out how people benefit from the behaviors that you want and how to reward the correct behaviors. And this is really kind of more of a hurdle, because you get into things like, suppose you don't want people to gamble. How would you create a positive reward system such that they feel better about not gambling? How do you give them a pathway to like $1 million that replaces the gambling option? would be one of the big questions. And really, you can't. You have to come up with something that replaces it for everyone, and you just you can't do it. So yeah, a strange thing about positive and negative reinforcement. But anyway, though, so yes, U.S. politics, though, it's been weird. We've been on about this a lot with the positive and negative aspects of reinforcement. We've gotten also really factionalized. If you look at the way that our demographics are spread right now, we're starting to get more and more people who are leaning very strongly left or very strongly right. We're not getting as many moderates as we used to. And I think that maybe that has a lot to do with more of the negative persuasion type of stuff. Is we get in and I see this all the time online anymore, is where you get people who are like, oh, liberals are poison. Anyone on the left is poison. And then you get people on the left saying the same thing about the conservatives. They say like, oh, the conservatives, they're just trying to ruin everything. They want to invade your uteruses and tell you when you can and cannot get pregnant, stuff like that. And when you get right down to it, there's not really a side that's villainous. I mean, everyone's kind of trying to accomplish what they want on their own end. When you start to think about it, you look at the right and you realize that they're trying to do things like get rid of regulations that are creating monopolies. Stuff like you've got the local internet service providers, and a lot of them hold monopolies because the state actually does grant them a local monopoly. They'll sign a contract and they'll say like, well, we won't allow anyone else to build these lines, and then you'll provide us with these prices for so long. Oh, we get this or that. We get like Walgreens gets a bunch of, they got a bunch of kickbacks. The state paid for employee training for Walgreens out in Illinois. Illinois footed the bill for their employee training. So think about that. The next time you hear an argument that like, oh, these companies deserve the money and they earn the money and everything like that, taxpayer money is actually quite often going into these companies and paying for people to get their training or to get the health benefits that they're not necessarily receiving. Because the system is really more integrated than that. There's not a straightforward sort of deal. And then, of course, you got people on the left, and they want to do trust busting. They want to get some corruption. Everyone wants to get corruption out of office. The people on the left want to make healthcare public so that it becomes more efficient without being in the hands of a private monopoly, stuff like that. And so neither side is really looking for evil, but we in the States have become rather factionalized, as that it's gotten to where like the left views the right as just greedy and evil and stupid, and the same goes for vice versa. But worst of all, it's been worse. It's been harder on the left than it has been on the right, because as it turns out, like I say, the right, they've gotten a little bit more of what they wanted. Like when they vote someone in, and they say like get rid of these subsidies and whatnot. It's sort of terrible because sometimes I see this, like for example, the Tea Party's been voted in and they're trying to get rid of farming subsidies. And people are like, yeah, get rid of the subsidies, helping out these stupid big corporations. And so they want to get rid of the farming subsidies because they help out the big corporations. But it's actually rather bad. It helps out the large corporations in the long run, because the reason we have those farming subsidies is because back when everyone could compete with farming, what would happen is you would get like little guys who would produce a bunch of food, and they couldn't sell to as large of a group of people. They couldn't sell to as many people as like a large company could, and so they would just sort of go under. Like they wouldn't be able to compete with prices on these other farms, and so their farmland would just go under, and it was creating a ton of problems. Just the whole food market was becoming volatile. And you don't want a volatile food market. It's a really bad idea. So we started creating a bunch of food subsidies that said that, like, okay, if you produce this much food, then, sell what you can, and then what you can't sell, we'll buy. The government will buy. And then the government just destroys it, because there's really it's like we don't have buyers for it, so we just destroy it. It's kind of inefficient, and it sounds stupid when you are told face value that they destroy food, but there's a reason that they do it, and it's mainly just because, we have to keep the prices competitive so food stays consistent, and we know how much people are going to be paying for food. So that's why they do it. But when they get into getting rid of the subsidies, when you get these guys and they're like, oh yeah, no, we're going to get rid of the corruption, we're going to get rid of all these subsidies, what happens then is that the large farms become the only ones, once again, that can really afford to be farming, because you've got these little guys and they produce food and they can't compete with Monsanto's prices or whatever. And the little guys just go under, and suddenly food prices become volatile again. So we've got politicians now who are trying to lean more towards that, but it's a better situation for the big companies that can claim near monopolies or oligopolies over food. So very dangerous, actually, kind of scary, but it's something that's happening currently. But the right is more motivated though, because they get people in, they say like, oh, I'm going to get rid of these subsidies, and then they do, and the damage that gets done is not like more than what happens when the left gets in and they subsidize a monopoly, but it's not like less either. They really all just seem to kind of gravitate towards the same problems. The system is just getting played one way or the other, however you look at it. Yes. Also, our government has gotten a little bit crazy because Eric Cantor, the Republican majority whip for Congress, he got ousted. A Tea Party candidate took his seat, actually. He got voted out of office. And a lot of people are not losing their seats. I mean, this is one thing. It's very hard to game our political system. It's very hard to get into our political system. It's really hard to get rid of incumbents. We have like a 90% incumbency rating. Most people come back. Most people can be in it for life. I mean, we had guys that voted to continue segregation that stayed on in Congress until they died. So those guys they never went away. But yeah, we get people who are like, we're getting some people kicked out, but Eric Cantor got kicked out. And so now John Boehner has proposed this whole, like, I'm going to sue the president thing. And the Supreme Court has actually thrown out a couple of President Obama's movements. Some of the stuff that he's been doing, the Supreme Court has shot down. And plenty of times with actually, what is the word? Not anonymous. When everyone votes. Okay, everyone in the Supreme Court voted. I can't think of the word. Everyone in the Supreme Court voted against some of the stuff that Obama was doing. He really has expressed some overreach with his powers. Although it hasn't been like malicious overreach, it's because the whole government's in gridlock. You could see why he would do some of that stuff. Some of the other abuses, I mean, like there have been abuses, but some of his executive overreach really hasn't been that severe from what I read. And it's been getting shot down when he does overreach. So, yes, very, very strange. But anyway, yeah, just my thoughts, not less of a focused sort of personal time today, just more thinking about our government, where we're going, what's in current politics, and the type of rhetoric that they're using. I'm not really seeing a lot of people anymore who are campaigning for positive change. It seems like they're mostly just campaigning to get rid of negative stuff. It's like the Democrats are committing evil, and we're going to vote me in and I'll get rid of the evil, and vice versa. The Republicans are evil, vote me in and I'll get rid of the evil. The birth control thing that came up, it's all this and that. It's like freedom's evil, evil, right and wrong. Like we can't encroach on someone's, suffering. Everyone's a victim, and there's really just there's not a lot of positivity anymore, it feels like. But positive messages are the ones that people respond best to, and it's actually how Obama got voted into office. I'm curious how the next presidential election is going to go when they get down to it, when somebody finally gets up there and they're like, okay, this time change and hope for sure, guys. Like, this time we're really going to change everything. No more status quo. We are honest to goodness, going to fix the wealth inequality. Because I get the feeling that whatever happens, they probably won't. And I think a lot of people are maybe starting to get the impression that the recession has been permanent for the middle and lower class in the U.S. I don't know if we're going to recover, really. We might. I mean, it could be a matter of time, but it just depends on whether or not another bubble pops, and that could happen. It's all been crazy, though. Reading about the banks, too. That's another one yeah. So, yes, positivity, negativity, elements of persuasion. Positive elements are more persuasive, negative elements work, but only when people are already with you. And so we factionalized, we're relying a lot on negativity. So yeah, that is my take on U.S. politics today. That is what I've been thinking of. As I said, not so focused, but that is that, I suppose. So, I guess I will catch you guys next time. Okay, actually, no, that was too negative to end on. Maybe the whole message of the government swallowed a fly, perhaps we'll die. No, not a good ending. I was thinking there are still people who are motivated and who are trying to do positive things for the country and to try and get ahead on stuff. I feel like there's close to about 500 people in Congress. There's like 400 people. There's a bunch of people in Congress. There's hundreds of people in Congress, and they don't all know each other, and they're not all the shifty, terrible people. I'm sure that a bunch of them are really nice guys when you get right down to it. Sometimes stuff turns out in a way that you really wouldn't expect. I know that in our own local area, we actually had a huge problem with our downtown. And this was something they tried for ages to fix it up and to make it work, and nothing worked. They built like rail lines, they did this, they did that, and then one day they finally just sold it off to some company, and this company started building, like flats and a couple of other things down there, and everything turned right around. It was really just kind of a matter sometimes of you'd be shocked occasionally how a little subtlety will fix a messed up system. I'll even say my local pharmacy has been terrible, just terrible in terms of workplace suffering. We're one of the busiest stores in the district, and for the longest time, I just assumed that we were critically understaffed to the point that we couldn't do our jobs. I mean, like I'd come in every day, and you would see like 150 prescriptions, and they would all be late. And you would just have like the worst day because you would sit down, people would come in and they'd say, "What's going on? What's going on? Where's all our stuff? Why don't you get things fixed? And why aren't you ready?" And you would say like, "Because sir, there's 150 late prescriptions and you happen to be one of them." So it used to drive me nuts. I thought that we had been just utterly destroyed. But we actually got a new pharmacist recently, and shockingly, all it really took was just a prioritization of workstation duties. Previously the way it worked is you got people who would sit at one place because they could like punch in text messages. They could text message while they were supposed to be working, and so you'd have someone would like cover pretty much everything, and then you'd have someone else, like you'd have employees who were sitting around like basically doing nothing. And so there was a lot of work being loaded onto one person. I usually would wind up stranded at the drive-thru for like 8 solid hours, and anyone who's ever worked the drive-thru can tell you that that is a miserable way to spend your day. I used to hate that. You'd get cars that would line up. I hate that we have like 2 lanes. I can't imagine what it must be like working at a bank where there's like 4 lanes and 1 teller. What a pain in the butt that must be. Because we get people who'd pull up to like lane 1 and I would be helping them, and then we get someone who'd pull up at lane 2. And you know, you get on the phone, you're like, "Hello, I'll be with you in just a minute," and you hang up. And then they summon you again, and they're like, "I'm here to pick up a prescription." And you're like, "I know, just hang on, I'll be with you in a minute. There's one of me and there's multiple lanes." So anyway, yes, that used to be it still sucks. It still really sucks because it's still very busy. It's still very busy, and you don't get breaks. There's no downtime whatsoever. We are still understaffed. But a little change, just a little subtle change, was enough to actually get everything so it was working smoothly. If not enjoyably, at least smoothly. So who knows? There could be... Shouldn't get too down on things. It's rather bleak in some sectors, and we've had some really just bizarre, wacky craziness. But it could take very little to turn things around. You never know. So, yes, negative and positive. Better to end on a positive note than a negative one. So I will catch you guys later.